Here's a twisted truth about World War II cinema that'll blow your mind. Most Western films sanitize the Eastern Front, but the Germans and Soviets created documentaries masquerading as drama. These aren't propaganda pieces. These are cinematic time capsules made by people who actually survived the horrors they're depicting. Military historians have certified these 15 films as frighteningly authentic. Some are so brutal they get banned. Others were pulled from festivals because they refused to feed comfortable narratives. But here's the real question that's going to wreck you. Which version of hell do you need to witness? Number 15. All Quiet on the Western Front, 2022. Edward Berger's German masterpiece transforms Erich Maria Remarque's classic novel into modern cinema language that hits different. This isn't the Hollywood version. This is lean, visceral, stripped-down warfare from a soldier's perspective, following a teenager named Paul as he discovers the machinery of death consumes everyone equally. The production rebuilt World War I battlefields with archaeological precision, and historians noticed immediately. Trenches weren't just sets, they were reconstructions based on archival photographs and veteran testimonies. Berger shot with handheld cameras to create documentary chaos, making audiences feel trapped in muddy coffins alongside these boys forced to become killers. The film earned multiple Academy Award nominations, partly because of its unflinching refusal to romanticize combat. What separates this from glossy war spectacles is Berger's commitment to sound design. The constant artillery creates psychological trauma rather than thrills. Former combat medics watching test screenings reported PTSD flashbacks during the hospital sequences. This German production proves modern filmmaking can achieve period authenticity without CGI excess, delivering something that feels lived in rather than performed. Number 14. Downfall, 2004. Oliver Hirschbiegel's controversial masterpiece documents Hitler's final 10 days in his Berlin bunker as the Soviet army closes in. This German film troubles audiences because it portrays the dictator as something worse than a monster, human. Working from historical memoirs, including accounts by Hitler's secretary Traudl Junge, Hirschbiegel reconstructs those claustrophobic final moments with archaeological accuracy that infuriates some viewers. In the production filmed extensively in St. Petersburg, using the city's architecture as doubling for destroyed Berlin, and historians immediately verified the research depth. Bruno Ganz's performance captures a broken old man rather than a screaming tyrant, and that's precisely what historians confirmed the real Hitler became as reality closed around him. The FSB security service actually praised the film's accuracy regarding Soviet assault tactics and the chaotic Nazi leadership collapse. Critics attacked the film's humanity toward Hitler, but Hirschbiegel defended the approach. Understanding evil requires seeing perpetrators as people, not cardboard villains. The final sequences depicting teenage soldiers and civilians conscripted for suicidal last-stand defense are brutally authentic. Former Wehrmacht soldiers who saw test screenings reported Hirschbiegel captured accurately the panic and desperation of Germany's final days when order dissolved into complete anarchy. Number 13. Das Boot, 1981. Wolfgang Petersen's submarine thriller becomes a claustrophobic pressure cooker, documenting German U-boat service with such precision that submarine crews from multiple nations reported movie watching as mandatory training. Based on the autobiography of war correspondent Lothar Günther Buchheim, who actually sailed on U-96, the film recreates underwater terror with suffocating authenticity. Petersen built a full-scale submarine interior that actors inhabited during production, creating genuine disorientation as they practiced real submersed procedures and learned actual operating protocols. Military historians from 3 countries verified that the tactical sequences reflected real underwater warfare, and the emotional devastation depicted during depth-charge attacks matches documented survivor accounts. The German Navy cooperated, providing technical consultants who ensured every detail from sonar systems to torpedo procedures remained historically accurate. What makes Das Boot legendary isn't just technical precision, but the way it humanizes German sailors as professionals doing their jobs, not evil incarnate. Veterans consistently reported that the film captured the monotony, terror, and desperate camaraderie submarine service demanded. Contemporary critics called it propaganda. Historians called it truth. The film's refusal to judge soldiers as individuals earning just following orders became its most controversial element. Yet military historians confirmed that German submariners faced genuine moral complexity navigating orders versus conscience. Number 12. Stalingrad, 1993. Joseph Vilsmeyer's 1993 German production about the Battle of Stalingrad deliberately avoids spectacle, instead following a Wehrmacht platoon from Italian leave through their transformation into frozen corpses. This isn't heroic cinema. This is anti-war testimony disguised as entertainment. The production consulted extensively with historical participants and military researchers who verified every weapon, uniform, and tactical movement. Vilsmeyer refused to show Soviet soldiers as faceless hordes, it instead depicting them as professional soldiers equally trapped by circumstances. German and Soviet historians both praised the film's balance, though some criticized it for implying Wehrmacht soldiers as victims rather than participants in systematic barbarism. The final sequences depict the battle's mathematical brutality. Men die from combat, disease, cold, and despair in equal measure. Production notes reveal Vilsmeyer deliberately shot in harsh winter conditions to make actors physically experience the cold his characters endured. What separates Stalingrad from Hollywood depictions is its refusal to manufacture meaning from slaughter. Soldiers don't make speeches, they freeze quietly. Former Wehrmacht soldiers watching the film reportedly wept at its accuracy, recognizing their own experiences translated to screen. Military strategists note the film captures the tactical collapse that transformed Stalingrad from winnable to mathematically impossible, showing how logistics failures and command incompetence destroyed entire armies. Number 11. The Ascent, 1977. Larisa Shepitko's Soviet masterpiece follows two partisans desperately searching for supplies through Nazi-occupied Belarus during winter 1942. But it's really a philosophical inquiry into betrayal, faith, and the meaning of heroism. Working from Vasil Bykov's novella, Shepitko demanded actors endure actual 40 below zero temperatures and genuine hunger to authentically embody character desperation. Production occurred in real Belarusian villages where similar partisan operations had actually occurred, grounding the narrative in genuine geography of suffering. Shepitko required every camera movement, gesture, and word to reflect internal motivation, creating almost documentary-style intimacy despite the film's deeply allegorical structure. The Soviet government censors nearly banned it for portraying betrayal sympathetically and suggesting that soldiers might choose collaboration over martyrdom, humanizing choices authorities deemed unpatriotic. Military historians from multiple countries have cited The Ascent as one of the most psychologically accurate depictions of partisan warfare, capturing how capture, interrogation, and torture genuinely forced impossible moral choices. The film won Berlin's Golden Bear Award, validating its artistic achievement while documenting real historical trauma. Shepitko's cinematography emphasizes vast, snowy landscapes where humans appear infinitesimally small, reinforcing how individual moral struggles matter little against war's machinery. Number 10. Come and See, 1985. Ilym Klimov's Soviet film is genuinely difficult to watch, which is precisely what makes it terrifyingly accurate. Following a young boy named Flyora who joins Soviet partisans fighting Nazi occupation in Belarus, the narrative descends into escalating atrocity that historians confirm reflects actual Nazi genocide tactics. Klimov worked with a former partisan fighter to verify every detail of German occupation brutality, and he pushed actor Alexei Kravchenko to experience genuine fatigue and hunger while dodging live ammunition used instead of blanks during filming. The result isn't entertainment. It's historical testimony that traumatized test audiences and earned international recognition as perhaps cinema's most uncompromising anti-war statement. Historians acknowledge that Come and See documents the largely ignored civilian experience of the Eastern Front, showing approximately 1.5 million Belarusian casualties that Hollywood cinema typically erases. The film's depiction of Nazi extermination units conducting mass executions follows documented historical patterns from actual Einsatzgruppen operations. Soviet officials nearly prevented release, fearing the film's refusal to glorify Soviet sacrifice might encourage defeatism. Instead, international military historians recognized Come and See as unflinching historical documentation. The film's psychological impact remains devastating because Klimov refuses to aestheticize violence, instead showing carnage as incomprehensible trauma rather than cinematic spectacle. Viewers consistently report being unable to forget specific sequences weeks after watching, validating the film's commitment to creating permanent emotional scarring. Number 9. The Cranes Are Flying. 1957. Mikhail Kalatozov's Soviet masterpiece captures the Great Patriotic War through a woman's experience, shifting cinema's perspective away from battlefield heroics toward intimate human cost. Following Tatiana Samoilova's character across Moscow's bombing campaigns and Russian front lines, the film emphasizes emotional suffering alongside tactical combat. Historians noted the production's authenticity in depicting Soviet homefront realities: food shortages, air raids, casualty notifications, and the psychological collapse of civilian society under total war. The film's famous dancing sequence became internationally legendary precisely because it juxtaposes human joy against war's destructive machinery, forcing viewers to confront how ordinary life continues despite catastrophe. Soviet audiences embraced the film as their greatest war movie, recognizing its portrayal of personal relationships struggling against historical forces that individuals cannot control. Kalatozov's cinematography captured Soviet cities and landscapes with such precision that historians later used the film as documentary evidence regarding specific locations' appearance during wartime. The production avoided heavy-handed patriotic messaging, instead showing how Soviet citizens experienced the war as personal tragedy rather than collective triumph. Contemporary critics in the West often misunderstood the film's subtle critique of Soviet sacrifice, but military historians recognized its accurate emotional documentation of Eastern Front reality, individual dreams dying in service to institutional survival. Number 8. Ivan's Childhood, 1962. Andrei Tarkovsky's directorial debut represents Soviet cinema's philosophical response to war, following a 12-year-old orphan boy named Ivan seeking revenge against the Germans who murdered his family. Shot in actual swampy no-man's land between German and Soviet lines, the production used real partisan operational areas, grounding Tarkovsky's poetic imagery in authentic geography of conflict. Unlike propagandistic Soviet films celebrating heroic sacrifice, Ivan's Childhood documents the violation of childhood innocence through war's machinery, showing how trauma transforms children into instruments of vengeance. Tarkovsky's cinematography emphasizes nature as silent witness to human destruction, using birch forests and water as symbolic counterpoints to mechanical death. Military historians appreciated the film's psychological authenticity regarding how partisan organizations recruited and utilized child soldiers, a historically documented practice authorities rarely acknowledged. The film's famous dream sequences show Ivan's memories of life before war, providing devastating contrast to his transformed present as a hardened child soldier. Soviet officials scrutinized the production skeptically, fearing it might undermine patriotic narratives, yet international film festivals immediately recognized Tarkovsky's achievement as genuinely artistic rather than propagandistic. The final sequences implying Ivan's execution by the Nazis created profound historical impact, as historians noted that captured Soviet partisans faced methodical elimination rather than prisoner of war status. Number 7. Ballad of a Soldier, 1959. Grigory Chukrai's Soviet film documents a young soldier's journey home following his destroyed two German tanks, creating intimate portrait of how war devastates ordinary soldiers and civilians attempting normalcy. The production consulted extensively with Russian military historians, ensuring that combat sequences reflected authentic tactical elements rather than propagandistic exaggeration. Chukrai's camera followed real Soviet landscapes, documenting the physical destruction of Russian countryside while capturing how civilian populations survived amid total war's devastation. Unlike earlier Soviet war films glorifying sacrifice, Ballad of a Soldier emphasizes individual cost and personal longing, showing how military service separated soldiers from human connection and civilian life. The narrative's road movie structure provided opportunities for depicting diverse Russian civilian characters and their struggles under wartime conditions, grounding the film in historical reality rather than ideological fantasy. Military historians noted the production's authentic portrayal of Soviet railway infrastructure destroyed and rebuilt during wartime, and the film's accurate depiction of civilian-military interaction under total war circumstances. The film became internationally celebrated, winning at Cannes and establishing Chukrai's reputation as a serious filmmaker willing to challenge Soviet propaganda cinema traditions. Contemporary viewers reported the film's emotional impact matched historical accounts from soldiers' memoirs and civilian testimonies documenting the Great Patriotic War experience. Number 6. They Fought for Their Country. 1975. Sergei Bondarchuk's epic Soviet film follows a small battalion attempting to hold off German advancement toward Stalingrad based on Mikhail Sholokov's novel. The production consulted former Red Army commanders and military historians, verifying tactical accuracy, and Bondarchuk's direction creates almost documentary-style authenticity in depicting small unit combat dynamics. Rather than showcasing individual heroics, the film emphasizes battalion cohesion and collective survival, reflecting how Soviet military doctrine actually functioned. Historians noted Bondarchuk's authentic portrayal of Soviet soldiers as professionals performing military duty rather than ideological fanatics, a realistic depiction Soviet propaganda typically avoided. The production consulted extensively with historical participants, incorporating personal accounts from surviving soldiers and officers who participated in actual Stalingrad operations. Bondarchuk's cinematography emphasizes landscape's overwhelming scale, making human soldiers appear infinitesimal against the war's vast machinery. The film's portrayal of casualty rates and material destruction reflected historians' understanding of actual Eastern Front brutality, avoiding comfortable narratives about military sacrifice. Contemporary Soviet audiences recognized the film's commitment to historical authenticity while maintaining emotional investment in character development. Military strategists analyzing the film noted Bondarchuk's accurate depiction of Soviet tactical doctrine, equipment, and the organizational collapse that occurred during major German offensives. Number 5. Panfilov's 28 Men, 2016. Alexander Kott's Russian production documents a 1941 defensive action where Soviet soldiers fought overwhelming German forces outside Moscow, based on historical accounts and extensive archival research. The production, financed through public donations, emphasizes community commitment to historical accuracy, with museums providing authentic costumes and weapons. Historians confirm that Kott's depiction of Soviet defensive tactics reflected actual combat procedures documented in multiple archival sources, making the film historically credible despite its nationalistic framing. The production's commitment to showing young soldiers' transformation into hardened fighters reflected historical patterns documented in Soviet military records. Kott consulted military historians and surviving veterans' testimonies, ensuring every combat sequence reflected realistic tactical elements. The film portrays the psychological transformation warfare inflicted on young conscripts, showing how combat experience stripped away civilian perspectives and replaced them with survival instincts. Military strategists noted the film's accurate depiction of Soviet human wave tactics and the devastating casualties such approaches generated against entrenched German positions. The production became controversial internationally for its nationalist framing, but historians acknowledged its commitment to documenting a specific historical moment with available research and archival evidence. Contemporary Russian audiences recognized the film as honoring sacrifice while maintaining historical accuracy regarding the actual battle's terrible costs. Number 4. August 1944, 2001. Vladimir Rozhkov's Russian military film documents Smersh counterintelligence operations against German agents infiltrating Soviet positions during the 1944 Baltic Offensive based on declassified KGB historical accounts. The production consulted Russian Federal Security Service archives and former counterintelligence officers, ensuring operational accuracy. Historians confirmed that Rozhkov's depiction of Soviet intelligence procedures reflected authentic documentation from archival sources, making the film historically credible despite its espionage thriller narrative. The production's meticulous attention to detail regarding interrogation techniques and counterintelligence methodology impressed military historians analyzing the film's accuracy. Russian security services publicly praised the production for portraying Soviet counterintelligence operations truthfully and professionally, without resorting to propagandistic mythology. The film's portrayal of Soviet soldiers as professional operators performing their duties reflected historical reality, that Soviet intelligence services operated with significant sophistication despite Western Cold War stereotypes. Military historians analyzing the film noted Rozhkov's commitment to showing operational complexity while maintaining dramatic momentum. The production's research included interviews with surviving Smersh operatives, ensuring that character behaviors and tactical decisions reflected authentic historical practice. Contemporary audiences recognized the film as serious historical documentation disguised as political thriller. Number 3. The Dawns Here Are Quiet, 1972. Stanislav Rostotsky's Soviet classic documents an all-female anti-aircraft detachment defending Soviet territory against German saboteurs infiltrating deep behind enemy lines in Karelia. The production consulted female war veterans and military historians, verifying authentic combat procedures and emotional dynamics among soldiers serving under frontline conditions. Historians noted that Rostotsky's portrayal of female combatants reflected historical documentation regarding Soviet women's military service, which Western cinema largely ignored or misrepresented. The film gained legendary status within Soviet culture, with many Russians considering it the nation's greatest war movie, validating its historical authenticity and emotional power. Rostotsky's direction emphasized camaraderie and mutual sacrifice among soldiers while avoiding propagandistic glorification of combat. The production's portrayal of how ordinary people respond to extraordinary combat situations impressed military psychologists analyzing the film's character authenticity. The narrative's tragic ending resonated with Soviet audiences because it reflected historical patterns of high casualty rates among frontline units, refusing to provide comfortable closure. Military historians studying female combatants noted the film's accurate depiction of how women soldiers experience combat, including specific details about operational procedures and tactical situations. Contemporary audiences worldwide recognized the film as transcending Soviet propaganda cinema to achieve genuine human drama documenting historical experiences. Number 2. The Brest Fortress, 2010. Alexander Kott's Russian-Belarusian co-production documents the initial German assault on the Soviet border fortress at Brest on June 22, 1941, when a 9,000-soldier garrison fought overwhelming German forces for several weeks, despite being completely cut off. The production filmed on location at the actual Brest fortress, where original intact bunkers, trenches, and structures remained from the 1941 siege. During production, crews discovered unexploded ordnance, shells, and reportedly remains of Soviet soldiers, grounding the filmmaking in authentic historical geography and physical evidence of warfare. Military historians consulted extensively with the production to verify every detail of the fortress's layout, defensive positions, and combat sequences. Historians confirmed that Kott's depiction of the siege accurately reflected documented historical accounts from German assault records, Soviet survivor testimonies, and contemporary military analysis. The production's portrayal of individual soldiers' experiences within the larger tactical situation reflected historical documentation regarding how soldiers coped with siege conditions, diminishing supplies, and hopelessness. Belarusian and Russian historians both praised the film's commitment to documenting a largely forgotten moment in World War II historical consciousness, emphasizing that tens of thousands of soldiers died at Brest defending Soviet territory. Here, the film's unflinching depiction of the siege's brutal human cost impressed military historians analyzing the film's psychological accuracy regarding extended combat under impossible circumstances. Number 1. The Unknown Soldier, 1957. Edvin Lane's Finnish epic documents a 1941 to 1944 Finnish machine gun company deployed during Finland's war against the Soviet Union, based on Väinö Linna's famous novel and extensive military records. The production consulted Finnish military historians, veterans of the actual Winter War and Continuation War, and military archives, ensuring tactical and emotional authenticity. Historians confirmed that Lane's depiction of brutal guerrilla warfare, human cost of conflict, and soldiers' psychological deterioration reflected documented historical accounts from official military records and surviving veterans' testimonies. The film's portrayal of ordinary soldiers struggling against overwhelming Soviet forces impressed international military historians as genuinely realistic rather than nationalistic propaganda. The production's commitment to showing both Finnish and Soviet soldiers as professionals performing their military duties reflected Lane's historical maturity and refusal to demonize enemy combatants. Contemporary audiences recognized the film's unflinching depiction of warfare's true cost, showing soldiers dying up close while comrades literally stepped over corpses to continue fighting. Military strategists analyzing the film noted Lane's accurate depiction of how Finnish soldiers adapted to Soviet assault tactics and the devastating casualties sustained during desperate defensive operations. The film's legendary status within Finnish culture validates its historical authenticity and emotional power, with surviving veterans consistently reporting that Lane captured their actual combat experiences with devastating accuracy. International military historians consider The Unknown Soldier essential viewing for understanding how ordinary soldiers experienced World War II's brutal Eastern European conflicts. So here's your final thought that's going to spark absolute war in the comments. If these German and Soviet films achieve terrifying historical accuracy by refusing Western heroic mythology, what does that say about American war cinema that still sanitizes combat into triumph narratives? These filmmakers survived what they depicted. They knew what bullets actually do to human bodies. They understood that courage matters less than luck, and that most soldiers die confused, scared, and doubting everything. Are modern blockbuster war films cowards for offering audiences comfortable closure, or are these brutally honest European productions traumatizing viewers unnecessarily? Tell us which film shattered your perception of World War II. Drop your controversial takes in the comments, because history demands we engage with uncomfortable truths rather than cinematic fantasy.